Our next story tonight is from Sikkim, a small state nestled in the eastern lap of the Himalaya range and the home of Kanchenjunga, the third highest peak on earth. But as I speak, the state is reeling, hit by a deadly tragedy, a natural disaster of massive flash floods which have ravaged the region after a sudden cloudburst. The deluge has submerged vast swathes of land. It has washed away roads and bridges, triggered catastrophic landslides and collapsed countless homes. The question is, how did it all start? What caused these flash floods? A cloudburst or a glacial lake outburst? Also, were scientific warnings ignored? Did the authorities disregard red flags? These questions are complex. We'll keep the answers simple. The story begins on October 4th, Wednesday. During the early hours that day, the Teesta River in Sikkim witnessed an unexpected surge in water flow. The swollen river started roaring through sparsely populated areas, caking every inch of its path in mud and debris and leaving little standing. What caused the river to overflow? Well, scientists are attributing it to the bursting of the South Lonak Lake's banks. This is the lake we're talking about. It is a glacial lake located in Sikkim's far northwestern region. It is also one of the 14 potentially dangerous lakes that is susceptible to a glacial lake outburst flooding, or GLOF. We'll explain what that concept is in just a bit. First, let's discuss why the lake's banks got ruptured. The government of Sikkim said it was due to incessant rains followed by a cloudburst. On your screens now is an official statement. It reads, and I quote, "Cloudburst-induced water surge around Lonak area led to flash floods in low-lying areas of the Teesta Basin, causing rise of water levels." That's what the government is saying. This is the official version, but some experts say that a glacial lake outburst could also have been a trigger. Now, what does this mean? To understand that, we'll first have to understand what glacial lakes are. Glacial lakes are basically large bodies of water that sit in front or on top or beneath a melting glacier. They're mostly made up of unstable ice or sediment composed of loose rocks and debris. This composition makes a lake very dangerous. If the boundary around such bodies breaks, huge amounts of water rushes down mountains. And this causes flooding in downstream areas as well. This phenomenon is called a glacial lake outburst, or a GLOF. Look at this map now. It shows you what causes this glacial lake outburst. It can be triggered by several reasons. It includes earthquakes, landslides, avalanche, high temperatures and extremely heavy rains. Glacial lakes can begin to overflow due to any of these reasons. And in the case of the South Lonak Lake, some say the trigger was heavy rain. The veracity of this claim is still being assessed, but it's a fact that this lake is susceptible to an outburst. And that's a big concern. According to reports, the lake had been under observation by government authorities for several years. A report by Sikkim's Forest and Environmental Department even found that the lake's area had significantly increased in the last 4 decades. In these 4 decades, its size and water volume apparently increased by nearly 145%. Look at these images now. They've been released by ISRO. They show how the lake's size decreased after the flash floods. On the 28th of September this year, the lake's area was somewhere around 167 hectares. On October 4th, it had reduced to just 60 hectares. A clear indication of how much of the lake's water got drained out. These assessments beg some bigger questions. How many glacial lakes are actually there in India, and how many of them are vulnerable to outburst floods? Now, according to the National Disaster Management Authority, or the NDMA, there are around 7,500 glacial lakes in India's Himalayan range. Out of this, around 10% of such lakes are located in Sikkim alone. And nearly 25 such lakes are assessed to be at risk. These figures have been estimated through the NDMA's remote sensing techniques. Look at this report now. It says around 15 million people worldwide face the risk of sudden flooding from glacial lakes. 15 million. Guess where half of these people live? In India and Pakistan. Yes, according to journal Nature, nearly half of the world's population susceptible to glacial lake outbursts lives in India and Pakistan. These are basically people who live within 50 kilometers of a glacial lake or 1 kilometer of a river that originates from a glacial lake and could be impacted. These findings are alarming. In the case of the Lonak Lake, more so. Why? Because reports say that multiple government agencies and scientific expeditions had red flagged the vulnerability of the lake several times in the past. This includes a 2019 report by Sikkim State Disaster Management Authority itself. It had warned that the lake was highly vulnerable to a glacial outburst. Perhaps it's time, high time, that we start taking these warnings seriously. Shifting our focus now to the United States, the White House is facing a unique problem. President Biden's dog, called Commander, is on a biting spree. Commander has now been pulled out of the White House. Reports say that one of the bite victims needed treatment from the White House medical unit. The White House has blamed the attacks on the stress of living in the premises. Officials have not disclosed the commander's current location yet. So what's the story of the first family's dog? Our next report has it all.
This is Commander, a 2-year-old German Shepherd. This pet is the Biden family's prized possession. But sadly, Commander has been taken away from the White House. Why? The U.S. Secret Service says that the German Shepherd has been involved in 11 reported biting incidents. Some experts say that the biting incidents could raise concerns of workplace safety and create tensions between the Secret Service and the Bidens. Commander's behavior has also created a dangerous work environment, as reports say that security agents were ordered to only go through certain entrances and not go to specific areas to avoid interaction with the German Shepherd. Agents had to communicate by radio about where the dog was and warn people to avoid the area. If you think Commander is the only unruly one, it's not true. Commander is one of the Biden's 2 German Shepherds. There is a younger dog named Major. Major was the first rescue dog to live at the White House. The pet was also involved in numerous biting incidents with Secret Service agents. Reports say that Major's wild behavior caused stress for the White House and strained their relationship with the Secret Service. How? Reports say that the agents were operating in an unsafe work environment due to the hazardous pet, which the first family had labeled as playful. A former Secret Service agent says that you can't bring a hazard into the workplace, and that's what is essentially happening with this dog. One time you can say it's an accident, but now multiple incidents is a serious issue. So, what makes the pets so violent? What makes them act out? Experts say that it's hard for pets to adjust to the White House life. You see, German Shepherds demand consistency and routine, and develop behavioral problems when deprived of those things. In the White House schedule, the pets are transported in cages each time the family makes an impromptu plan to their holiday home. The dogs see a different person walking them with a leash each day. The pets see too many different people on a daily basis. German Shepherds get disturbed by such drastic changes. Dog experts say that pet owners have to change their behavior first before you can even think about changing the dog's behavior. If they can't do that, the dog's never going to be able to be helped in their care. Although it could be a difficult period for the first family, experts say that the dog's removal is a good sign. The White House can now think about the well-being of the pet and make changes accordingly. Will Commander return to the White House? More importantly, will the White House create a more pet-friendly environment?
We begin today's show with a big development from the Ukraine war. At least 49 people have died in a Russian attack on a village in Kharkiv. Among them, a 6-year-old boy. Ukrainian officials have called it possibly the deadliest wartime attack on civilians in months. A Russian missile struck a grocery shop. It took place just after 1 p.m. local time, an attack on an ordinary grocery store, that too in a village which is not on a front line in this war. Footage from the site in the immediate aftermath showed bodies strewn across the road. Rescue workers walked through the rubble looking for any signs of life. The people around the area look dazed, shocked at the sheer brutality. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who was attending a summit with European leaders in Spain, condemned the attack. He wrote on social media, and I quote, "Russian terror must be stopped. All those who help Russia circumvent sanctions are criminals." Zelensky also renewed calls for allies to provide Ukraine with more air defenses so his troops can protect the country from Russian terror. Russia has yet to comment. And as a war-torn country faces Russian terror, there is one question that echoes in the corridors of power in Kyiv. How long does Ukraine have? How long can Ukraine stay in this war? How long does it have before it runs out of ammo to defend itself, leaving it helpless and defenseless? As the war drags on, the West finds itself draining its arsenal of weapons. Alarm bells are going off. NATO wants to ramp up production of weapons. Earlier this week, it urged member nations to do so. Yes, more weapons. But as NATO scrapes the bottom of the barrel to satisfy Ukraine's unending appetite for more arms, it's clear that NATO's own security wall is crumbling. The Western world is struggling with weapon shortages. This is not news, but it gains significance today, especially when US funding for weapons procurement for Ukraine failed to find a place in a stopgap spending bill within the US Congress. Now, uncertainty looms over the future of US aid to Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky has a crisis at hand. He's grappling with Western war fatigue. Ukraine's conflict with neighboring Russia has dragged on for a grueling 20 months. It has put pressure on Western nations to continue supplying weapons to the war-torn country. Ukraine supporters have flooded the country with weapons in a bid to bolster its defenses. So how much has the Western world sent to Ukraine? The US is the largest contributor, having committed $46.6 billion worth of weapons. Next is Germany and the United Kingdom, having pledged nearly $19 billion and $7.3 billion worth of weapons to Ukraine, respectively. Norway, Denmark and Poland follow. In June this year, the US also announced additional security assistance for Ukraine worth $500 million. The military aid from Western nations to Ukraine includes tanks, combat vehicles, air defense systems, long-range artillery, howitzers, anti-tank weapons, drones, etc. It includes sophisticated tanks like the American Abrams tanks, the British Challenger tanks, the German Leopard tanks. They have helped Ukrainian troops fend off Russian aggression to a certain extent. It also includes combat vehicles like the Stryker armored fighting vehicle. These have been used in Iraq and Afghanistan. In air defense systems, the US has given the Patriot missile system. It is highly sophisticated, requires specialized training for Ukrainian soldiers. S-300 missile systems have also been sent. Among long-range artillery is the HIMARS. They are believed to have been central in Ukraine's success in pushing Russian forces back on the south last year. Kyiv has also received drones that have helped in surveillance and targeting. Turkey has sent the Bayraktar TB2 armed drones. These have a track record in Syria and Iraq. And finally, the US has also announced support in providing advanced fighter jets, including the coveted F-16 jets to Ukraine. The Biden administration has sent a substantial amount of equipment through the Presidential Drawdown Authority. Under this scheme, military gear that is already in US inventory is pulled from the inventory and then sent overseas, in this case to Ukraine. The US funding for Ukraine has mostly come from the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, or USAI. But guess what's happening now? According to the US Department of Defense, as of October 3rd this year, there is no more funding left for newly manufactured military hardware. The only hope is some $5.4 billion worth of hardware from the US inventory that can be sent to Ukraine. But what happens once that is gone? Well, the US Department of Defense hopes to replace it with new gear, and the department has about $1.6 billion on hand to accomplish that. But the department is requesting more funding to help replenish its stocks. It has been careful so far in drawing down its own military hardware because it doesn't want to put its own readiness at risk. Now, despite all this, Ukraine continues to ask for more. I mean, the sheer volume of artillery that Ukraine demands is nothing short of staggering. It is not clear how many shells are fired by Ukrainian troops in the war, but a US defense official told American media in July that they typically fire between 2,000 and 3,000 shells per day. This number may have fluctuated, but it gives us an idea into Ukraine's current use of weapons. And it's not just the US that is running low on its stockpile and money for Ukraine. The UK is also short of weapons for Ukraine. Reports say the British military top brass want other countries to fill the gap. But the truth is, few countries are in a position where they can help Ukraine more than they already have. In Europe, Hungary continues to block a 500 million European Union tranche of arms and ammunition. And a European official told another news publication earlier that no EU state can contribute any more weapons from their own stockpiles without endangering their own security. Moreover, the Western tanks and vehicles were supposed to turn the tide in favor of Ukraine on the battlefield. Instead, Russian troops have reportedly turned the battlefield into a graveyard of Western tanks, trucks. The Ukrainian troops suffered heavy casualties during their counter-offensive campaign. The Russian military has shared footage showing destroyed Western equipment abandoned by Ukrainian troops. If modern, sophisticated Western weaponry are yet to make a significant impact on the Ukrainian battlefield, how long does NATO plan to keep supplying them to Ukraine? If they are indeed ramping up production, how much time will it take before Ukraine can actually start using them? In contrast, Russia seems to have swiftly mobilized its own wartime economy to replenish its own stockpiles. So how much time does Ukraine truly have to ensure its survival in this war? Today's incident is a reminder, a stark reminder of how bloody this war can get, and that an unending supply of weapons will only add to more loss of life. WION World is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news updates on the move.